Hello YouTube. I want to talk today about more of the signs that I'm seeing, observing, and reading about that just indicate that we're in some epic, what I believe are end times, pre-end times, times of trouble leading right up to the Great Tribulation. Some of you will be familiar with that terminology, some of you won't, but we're in some very interesting times, to say the least. I read an article this past week about the Mississippi River. The author kind of posed the question, could the Mississippi River dry up? Well, I don't know if it'll ever actually dry up, but it may well get to the point where transporting cargo by way of barge up and down the river becomes nearly impossible. You see, the water levels at Memphis are down like 13 feet. They're down 20 feet in Vicksburg, Mississippi. In St. Louis, the levels of the water around 15 feet, and that depth should be 30 to 32 feet. What this does is greatly reduces the amount of cargo that can go up and down the river. For every inch that the water level goes down, a barge has to lighten the load by 17 tons. This is just an incredible figure, and it tells us a lot about the price of goods, and particularly food. And so it's something to continue to keep your eyes on as we see this unbelievable drought continue to unfold before us. Read another drought-related article. The Powerton electric plant in central Illinois had to shut down half of its capacity because the cooling reservoir that it was using to cool down its power machinery was down, way down, and it was so low they could no longer get the adequate amount of water into the system, and they just had to shut down half the plant. Not only was the reservoir level going down, but the drain that leads from the reservoir to the plant was clogged with the carcasses of dead fish. And I've been talking about dead fish, dead birds. I believe is all part of God's judgment. He uses some very obvious signs when he's judging a nation. Hosea chapter 4, many good teachers on YouTube been referring to this. So another just example of the extreme weather that we've had and the extreme summer that we've had, which also brings me to another news item. In 1895, they started taking keeping records of the weather. And since 1895, we have never had a July as hot as the one we just experienced. Now that's irrefutable. Those are things we really can't argue about because they've got that black and white, and this is extreme weather. And you know, if you go to the scriptures and look at how God has judged in the past, and he makes many references in his word to judgment, he often uses drought and famine to judge a people. I just think this is something very significant that we need to be paying attention to. We are in some extreme weather. We're seeing some bizarre things happening all over the world with earthquakes, volcanoes. This is no mistake. The situation that's brewing in the Middle East should have your attention all the time, every day. But not only has the weather just been off the charts, weird, but our economy continues to languish. And the Republican side of the Senate Budget Committee released some figures this past week, and they indicated that 100 million Americans are on some form of welfare. Guys, that is just a dreadful number. That's about 1/3 of our country on some form of welfare. Now, I try to discuss the times we're living in. I'll try to engage people about how they feel about the economy and things that are going on in the world, and people are just in denial. They just think it's business as usual. It is not business as usual. We're in some very dire economic circumstances, and this could get really off the charts and could affect all of us in very negative ways. One last piece of information. I read an article about a shipping company the oldest American shipping company. They've been doing it longer than anybody else, hauling goods across the seas. Just went bankrupt. They've been doing that a long time, and the reason they went bankrupt is because the volume of goods and services coming into and out of this country have greatly declined. There's a thing called the Baltic Dry Index, which measures the amount of cargo and freight on these ships coming and going. It's a measure of commerce, and it is down 51% over this time last year. Now that is hard and fast. Those are things that are irrefutable. This is an indication that we are not in a recovery. We are in my opinion, and I'm not alone, in a depression. And I have people say, well, we don't have soup lines. I beg to differ. 1 out of 7 Americans are on food stamps. That's a monstrous soup line. 1/3 of our population is on some form of welfare. These are dire times. And what you need to do, I'm not going to talk about buying silver, buying gold, storing food, water, which I think those are all good ideas. The most important thing you need to do is take care of spiritual matters, and that is to make sure that you've trusted Jesus Christ as your Savior. And that means you've placed your trust in what He did on the cross 2,000 years ago and His resurrection from the dead, to trust those things to be sufficient payment for your sin. And you need a Savior. And I can just tell you, my personal recommendation, I have known Him as my Savior for 44 years, and it's the greatest thing in my life, and the best decision that I ever made at age 11. And I encourage you to do that, to do it soon, because the days that are just ahead of us are going to be some kind of roller coaster ride. This world better get ready. You need to get ready. I'm going to include the links to these stories in the information box. I'm also going to include the link to my site, howtobeforgiven.com, where I discuss more in depth being right with God in these last days. Thanks for listening.